Hi guys. So today I'm going to talk about breathing in a yoga practice. Now breathing is a very important part of yoga, so much so that it has its own limb of the 8 limbs. So breathing is a very important piece to the yoga practice. And breathing in yoga is called pranayama. And prana means our life force energy, and nayama means to retain. So we want to retain life. And by doing that, we retain life through breathing. Because if we stopped breathing, we would no longer exist, we would expire. So when we are stressed out, nervous, anxious, any of those negative emotions happening, we tend to breathe very fast and very shallow, and we don't really breathe deep down into our belly. So yoga practice teaches us to use the full capacity of our lungs. And when we breathe that full capacity in, we begin to relax and calm the body as well as the mind. So that's why you'll see many meditation practices. And as we're practicing through yoga asana, breathing becomes a very important component to that whole system. So for the sake of this class, I only teach a few breathing exercises just to know for the practice of yoga, the physical practice. But there are deeper practices that can be done through pranayama to do different purposes and redirect energy in different ways and do different things. I get into that in the 122 course, but for the sake of this, I'll teach a few breaths that are related to the physical practice of yoga. And up to this point, you might have watched already. I cue the breath often in a yoga class. You'll hear me say inhale, exhale, all of the time. And in the beginning, when we start to practice yoga, it's not as important to know when you're breathing in or when you're breathing out if you're doing it right. It's just as long as you're connected to that breath and you're breathing. So the first breath I want to teach, and I do this in every single one of my yoga practices, even not at the college, my regular classes that I teach elsewhere. And it's called 3-part breath, or Samavriti Pranayama is the Sanskrit name for that. So 3-part of equal breath, where we breathe in through the nose, deep into the belly and a little hold, and then exhale out through the nose. So we want to breathe in and out through the nose in a yoga practice if we can, because it humidifies, heats the air, keeps the air warm, so the lungs stay. If we breathe in cold air, it would constrict the lungs. So we really want the lungs to relax as well. But when we get into that 3-part breath and just center ourselves and be still for a few minutes before we start to move in a practice of yoga, we calm the mind. So in yoga, we call like the mind stuff the vrittis. So we end up quieting those vrittis so we can sort of get out of that past future moment in our mind and worrying about things and being in the present moment, just beginning our physical practice of yoga. So Samavriti Pranayama, breathing in through the nose, filling into the belly, and exhaling equally out through the nose. So just slowing the breath down, clearing the mind, really setting that intention. Now if we would like a visual with breath, sometimes I teach like drawing a square. And everybody has different lung capacity. So it's not like if I count, you might already, your lungs be full and some other student has room to go. So sometimes I like to start and draw a square, like inhale, pause, exhale, pause. So for about 4 counts, inhale, pause, exhale, and pause. So that's another way to give a visual if you're just using breath to relax and calm down before meditation, or just if you feel overwhelmed and you have a moment to settle yourself somewhere and just find a break from those thoughts. So Samavriti Pranayama, I start every single one of my classes with that. And importance is we want to sit tall, so that whether we're standing or sitting down on the floor on our yoga mat, we want to make sure our spine is nice and long, because the mechanics of breathing, I won't go into too much detail, but we have our lungs, we know that bring in oxygen into the body. But the muscle underneath the lungs is called the diaphragm muscle. And that diaphragm muscle is the main action muscle of breathing. So when the brain triggers that, there's a nerve called the phrenic nerve that is in the diaphragm, and the brain triggers that nerve, and the nerve fires and pulls that diaphragm down. And then the vacuum, as we inhale, vacuums the air in, and then the diaphragm then on the exhale relaxes as it contracts. And then we breathe out through the nose. So inhale, the muscle contracts, I should say. Exhale, the muscle relaxes. So we want to give a lot of space for that. It's a dome-shaped muscle. There's two sides, left and right hemisphere. And if we're sitting like this, you're really, compromising how far that diaphragm muscle could go. So if we're sitting nice and tall, we have more space, we can bring in more oxygen into the body, into the brain. Oxygen's really good for the brain. It really calms the mind down. And then another thing with anatomy is we have these little nerve endings, a lot of nerve endings that are in the gut. So we have a sympathetic nervous system and a parasympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system, we trigger to relax. And the sympathetic nervous system is that, the active fight or flight kind of thing where the adrenaline's going, right? So in yoga, what do you think? We want to trigger the parasympathetic nervous response. We want to relax. So the main nerve of the parasympathetic nervous system is called the vagus nerve. And it's a cranial nerve, and it branches down all the way through. And a lot of the nerve endings of the vagus nerve end up in the gut. So when you hear that, go with your gut instinct, or, you want to digest, not just food, you want to digest your life or digest what's going on. So the vagus nerve has all these nerve endings that end up in the gut. So when you put all of that pressure and the diaphragm goes into the gut, you stimulate those nerves to relax the body and trigger that parasympathetic response. So this is to can calm and relax through physically through the breath. And also there is a lot of gas in our intestines called nitric oxide. Not nitrous oxide, that's laughing gas. Nitric oxide. So nitric oxide is a natural vasodilator that opens up. And think about vasodilation relaxes. So our blood pressure comes down. Whenever our vessels dilate, we trigger that parasympathetic nervous response as well. So deep breath, relax. So Samavritti pranayama. So another common type of breath in a yoga class would be what's called, you might have heard it, Ujjayi pranayama. And I can't spell it right now. I think it's Ujjayi. So Ujjayi pranayama is that ocean sound created in the back of the breath. So I don't know if I could do it on film, but it's, you could Google it if you can't hear me, but it's inhale through the nose. And on the exhale, you want to create a little resistance in the back of the throat. So you hear like an ocean. Sort of like Darth Vader breath, if you're into Star Wars. So inhale and exhale. So that resistance that's created in the back of the throat there stimulates calming brain waves. So that sound quiets the mind, quiets that energy of thought. So, and it's also when you're practicing yoga, you're pushing yourself too hard if Ujjayi becomes hard to do. So if you have to breathe harder, breathe faster, you're going to start to use your mouth, and you're not going to get that Ujjayi sound because you're going to be breathing too fast. So Ujjayi is there to remind us to slow down as well when we're practicing yoga, especially in our own yoga practice. I don't teach Ujjayi all that much. A lot of teachers do. I don't practice it myself. Sometimes I do, but often I just mindful of the breath. But Ujjayi is there. Sometimes we can be self-conscious about Ujjayi because it's, you hear all that. But if you go to a yoga studio, you'll hear a lot of breathing. So Ujjayi Pranayama. And Ujjayi means in English victorious breath. So just we're victorious and we're powerful over our being and what's going on. And a couple of more breaths is very important. If you want to know when to inhale or exhale in a yoga practice, inhale would be expanding. So whenever we're expanding, we're reaching up, right? We're doing maybe a back bend. We're lifting the heart. We're lifting open the chest. We really want to focus on that inhale breath. So inhale to that full lung capacity, right? Inhale, lifting the chest up further. So that's called an expanding breath, when we really open up the chest and we want to get the most benefit of the inhale breath. So whenever we're reaching up or we're holding and we're reaching up with the arms, or we're in a back bend, lifting through that chest, we want to focus on the inhale. And then the next breath we can focus on whenever we're folding forward in any poses, like a forward fold, or a pyramid pose, or trying to think of the seated forward fold, Paschimottanasana. Anytime we're folding, we want to focus on the exhale, right? So we inhale, right, and then exhale as we fold. We're focusing more on the, and then we may take a little inhale in, and then exhale, a little bit deeper into it. So what the exhale does also is relax the muscles, right? The exhale part of the breath relaxes the muscle we're stretching. So when we're inhaling, remember, it's energetic. Exhaling is more relaxing. So when we're focused on that exhale, and you might hear me cue, breathe into the space, and you're like, how do I breathe into my foot? But you inhale and exhale. When you focus on that exhale, imagine that muscle that you're stretching, relaxing, whatever muscle it may be, hamstring, calf, quadricep, whatever muscle that we are working to stretch. Focus on that exhale so it relaxes, and then we get a little deeper into the stretch. So 3-part breath, Ujjayi breath, expanding breath, and sinking breath. Those are the few breaths that we should know for a yoga practice. And we can get into a little bit more. So if you want to know a little bit more about it beyond this course, it's called pranayama. There's many different types of them. And if you're really interested in breath, give me a shout out if you want to know anything else. But other than that, that's our breath lesson for today. You guys take care. Namaste.